I think maybe what we haven't thought as much about is just how do we move from let's just feed 200% of NRC for all of the minerals and vitamins, and how do we get more strategic with that, right? Because there are going to be certain minerals and vitamins that are next level important in terms of immune response that this calf is experiencing at this time.
Welcome to Rumination Podcast, presented by Jeffo Nutrition. Hi, I'm your host, Chris Gwyn, and today's discussion will focus on management, nutrition, and receiving cattle with Dr. Stephanie Hansen of Iowa State University. Dr. Hansen is the Tyrone D. Arts, MD, Chair for Faculty Excellence in Animal Science at Iowa State University. An Iowa native, she earned her BS from Iowa State and her MS and PhD from North Carolina State University. With over 110 peer-reviewed publications and over $11 million in funding, she has established an original and impactful beef research program. A major focus of her program is the refinement of mineral requirements for feedlot cattle. She has received early and mid-career awards in research from Iowa State University, the Midwest section of ASAS, as well as National ASAS. Dr. Hansen is passionate about training the next generation of animal scientists and recently published the Graduates Mentors Trail Map, a guide for faculty who work with graduate students. She enjoys hiking, photography, and writes crime thrillers set in national parks as well. Dr. Hansen, welcome to the Rumination Podcast.
Hi, Chris. It's great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you with us. Dr. Hansen, before we jump right into learning about new approaches to nutrition and management of beef cattle, in particular receiving period, I'd enjoy hearing about the journey that brings you to research and teaching.
Absolutely. So I did not grow up on a beef operation, but my grandparents had cattle, and so I spent a lot of summers there. So I had the beef bug, so to speak, by the time I went to undergrad at Iowa State, but I was never pre-vet. I was really focused on what we could do, and eventually I realized that what that was nutrition to actually keep animals from having to see the vet if we didn't have to. And so I found my passion for nutrition through a senior level nutrition class, and I call that my light bulb class, and I teach that now. So I've been teaching that for over 14 years, and I think that's really kind of a full circle moment to be, at the front of the classroom for the class that gave me the passion for nutrition. I wandered in totally by accident to a wonderful lab with Jerry Spears at NC State and kind of had the personality where I could get interested in anything. And, that guy's passionate about minerals. And so I became a mineral nerd too. And that's really expanded to vitamins too, as I've been at Iowa State. And that's some of the things that we'll, I think, talk about here today. So I think my journey has really been from somebody who didn't really grow up on a beef operation, but got to the point where now I have cows of my own here and get to work with, feedlot operators all the time and really get to see how our research can have impact for them.
No, it's a wonderful story and journey. And as like with many, our passion for livestock gets us going out of our comfort zones and teaches us to learn new things. So congratulations on that. So circling back to your research, Dr. Hansen, over the past decade, wondering what have you seen as the biggest changes in cattle receiving practices that have driven, and maybe what have driven some of those changes, whether it's science, economics, consumer expectations, just to kind of give us a capsule of what are the changes you've seen.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest things we've learned in the receiving cattle nutrition is really the importance of what happened to that animal before they came to the feedlot. Now, of course, we're a very segmented industry, so it's really difficult to control that. But we do have a lot of people who will have retained ownership and will have the opportunity to really control more of the nutrition that gets into that animal from birth all the way out through harvest. A lot of our work, especially in our transit stress research, highly points to the value of having an animal who has gotten some preconditioning in him, bunk breaking them, being able to get the right zinc nutrition into them, for example, has been really powerful in helping those animals hit the ground running, so to speak. It seems really important in especially getting cattle up on feed more quickly. We've seen that in a variety of studies now that with zinc, but also with other trace minerals, where in some studies where we've created kind of what I would call really mild, not severe mineral deficiencies of things like copper and zinc and manganese and selenium, those animals do not recover feed intake as quickly after trucking. And I think that one of the things that we know in nutrition is that we tend to fortify the diet in that period with minerals and vitamins, in part because we know that animal is not going to hit the bunk quite as quickly after arrival. And that could be because of tiredness or commingling stress or, the immune response he's giving to the vaccination we just gave him, right? We do all the things to that animal, and yet we expect them to eat and drink and gain and have a great immune response. So I think anything that we have learned that helps that animal get on feed more quickly is kind of the secret sauce in receiving.
Yeah, absolutely. No need to say any more. That kind of hits the point, right? And do you think, I mean, the science behind that, is it economics that's driven some of that? Are there impacts of consumer expectations that have also altered what we should be doing today than we've done in the past?
So, from a consumer perspective, I would say probably the biggest one, and this is a challenge with maybe a consumer that doesn't completely understand all of our practices, is we have pretty aggressively moved away from mass treatment of animals on arrival. And that's really a practice now that is restricted to animals who are really high risk. So, a bunch of, a mixed load of sex heifers and bulls and the hills of Kentucky that haven't seen copper in their entire lifetime, right? Like those are the animals that are now getting that on arrival. Dairy beef are probably getting it on arrival because they're little sickos sometimes. But I would say most of our things are probably economically driven now, right? Feeder calves this fall are going to cost $3,000 in the U.S. per head at placement for a 5 to 7 week calf. Right? It's crazy the prices of animals right now, which means there's a tremendous amount of pressure to make sure that that animal performs, maintains their health and welfare in the feedlot. So I think the dry matter intake stuff still comes back to how do we help them get a good start in the feedlot? Because every day that he takes longer to come up on feed is a day that he's in the feedlot even longer, right? And this is a time period where even though feed costs aren't too bad right now, it's probably saving our bacon, so to speak, in the cost side of things. But it's really important that he has as few bad days. I call them bad days, right? You don't want a bad day because of a bunker eating error or a mixing error or a health outbreak. How do we have as few bad days as possible?
Yeah, you've got a lot of money at risk there with that expensive calf, and we need to do whatever we can to maximize the output, right? Well, thank you for sharing that. So further on, how was your approach to nutrition during the receiving period shifted with some of the new research you've done or others have done? And are there emerging strategies or even feed additives? You mentioned zinc earlier that you're particularly excited about. What are we doing differently today that we didn't do in the past?
Yeah, I think now and moving maybe into the future too, this idea of precision nutrition. How do we go from making pen level decisions for 100 head or 200 head in a pen to making single animal based decisions? And there's all kinds of challenges with that, right? But I think with some of the wearables and different technology sensors and stuff that we have now, we're increasing our likelihood of being able to do some of those things. Some of the work that we've been doing in collaboration with Jody McGill, who's a bovine immunologist here at our Iowa State vet school, has focused on things like giving a shoot side application of something. So some of those have been like intranasal applications of zinc, for example, or an intranasal application of vitamin A. Vitamin A is a cool molecule when you think about the benefits. Really for mucosal health. So think about like respiratory tract health, epithelial cell health. You think about vitamin A with like your vision and stuff like that, right? Like night vision. But really on the bovine side of things, probably the principal thing that we think about with vitamin A in receiving animals is going to be related to making them have a good immune response and maintaining healthy epithelial cells. So I'm really excited about the prospect of like, so when I think about things that could be delivered in the chute, I think about things that a feedlot producer has two chances for, right? One on arrival when they're given tags and vaccinations and deworming. So that's kind of well, we've already done some stuff to this calf, but we could probably give him a better chance to get started here in the feedlot if we give him whatever this is, right? An injection, a drench, an intranasal in this case. The second one is when you have that pull for that actual treatment, right? So you pull him in to give some sort of antibiotic therapy or something because he's got respiratory. are these things that could be an ancillary or an additional treatment that are either going to allow us to maybe use a different level of antibiotic, or allow us to just say, well, hopefully we don't have to see him back here in the chute again because we've given him the best kind of nutrition to go out. So there's very surprisingly little information out there on really what the nutrition of the sick bovine should be, in terms of like what should be in his diet, right? What should be in the hospital pen? Our first thought is like, well, less corn than he had in his home pen, right? To give him some roughage and make his belly feel better. But what are we leaving on the table that we're not giving that animal the opportunity to say have the right vitamins and minerals in every mouthful because he's probably eating a lot less, right? So are there different ways to get that into the system?
Now, to your point, the sick pen, storm diets. So, do you find that, out of my naivety of knowledge, producers typically have a different diet for sick pens, or is it just fairly basic? Get them back on feed and get them healthy again.
Yeah, I would say that, especially in the last several years, the philosophy has really shifted to get that animal back to their home pen if at all possible. Bad things in general tend to happen if you're in the hospital pen, right? But if you think about some big feedlots where the nearest working facility is a half mile, a mile plus away, we sometimes joke in our feedlot with a really long 60 pen facility that pen 60 feels like it's in the next county, but it's still so much closer than it would be if you're moving cattle a mile to a working facility. So that's the value of a hospital pen, right? They get watched more closely. They're near the working facility. If you have a lame animal, you don't want to ask them to have to do all of that walking again. So there is a lot of value in getting them back to their friends, back in the home pen, back on the same ration and stuff. So if there's something we could give them in the chute before we send them back to there, I think there's a lot of interest in that.
It makes a lot of sense, and as you say, they're already doing it. It's relatively practical, so we're not asking people to do more work than they are already doing. What about balancing proven traditional practices with kind of newer, we'll call it maybe even data-driven approaches in receiving phase? And I think you've touched on some of those with what can we do in the chute, but there are other things that uh, we need to get past on what we've done in the past that we could do differently to make that getting back on feed and that early performance really impactful.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And so we probably historically have really thought about like what does the protein of that ration need to be? How do we get some high quality digestible protein in front of them? Some of the evidence that says a higher concentrate diet's actually good because there's some preference tests that would say they would prefer that over something that's really high roughage. And of course, we have our classic newly, weaned ball and calf that shows up. He needs some sort of long stem forage in the bunk because that's going to be the most familiar and least scary feed stuff to him. There's some nice evidence that says when we can get those animals to drink, right? So if you can put additional tanks and feeder in pens, especially if they're perpendicular to the fence, so that when those cattle are naturally wanting to walk those pens and look at things, they basically bump into that water and they're like, oh, this is where the water is, right? So that's, I think, one of the rate limiting steps. There's maybe a little bit of data that says you maybe don't want to drench those animals and force them to have to consume that water, but maybe value in providing additional nice clean water to help them get off and get started. I think maybe what we haven't thought as much about is just how do we move from let's just feed 200% of NRC for all of the minerals and vitamins, and how do we get more strategic with that, right? Because there are going to be certain minerals and vitamins that are next level important in terms of immune response that this calf is experiencing at this time. There's going to be ones, we're really interested in things that support antioxidant capacity, which is a little bit of a fuzzy topic, right? Because there's a lot of things that negatively affect antioxidant capacity, from heat stress to immune stress, et cetera. But, you know, in our transit work, every time we truck them, antioxidant capacity takes a hit, drops 15 to 20%, right? And as we have tried things like injectable vitamin C, for example, we see those animals again come back up on feed more quickly and gain better after trucking. I think there's value in thinking about maybe more specific. What are the functions of some of these minerals and vitamins? How do we be more strategic? We maybe don't need 200% of everything. Maybe we can still be 100% of one thing and be 300% of something else. And maybe it's only for the first 2 weeks or the first 28 days, really that first ration. And as we move up to other rations from there, some of those, things can come back, especially if they happen to be something that has a higher price tag.
Yeah, it comes that balance of economics and outgoing. I think this is why sometimes you mentioned earlier zinc and then some of the other trace minerals, but maybe we focus back on zinc because it has the impact, but are we missing something or a vitamin that we're missing to make that immune system really function? It's fascinating. Lots to learn. Which then brings us next question. We're going to fast forward 5 years. Well, let's say 10 years. And what do you see as the modern twists that would impact the new standard in cattle, receiving cattle management or nutrition? If you had a, you know, seeing window into the future, how would you see things being done differently today?
Yeah, what does my crystal ball say? So I think two things. I really think as the wearable sensors, so think ear tags or maybe collars. I don't think they work as well on the beef side as they do on the dairy side, but so ear tags and things like that. As they get cheaper, as they get, I don't know, right now we've got some challenges where some of them kind of interfere with other things. So you've got to kind of figure that out. Um, Labor is going to continue to be one of our biggest challenges in the beef industry, right? Like we just don't have as many people who are willing to do some of the work that's required, or that labor force just simply isn't available. How do we help somebody become a better cowboy or cowgirl in terms of their ability to identify sick animals, right? Because I definitely think that our ability to say either get the right nutrition into an animal that prevents the shipping fevers and the breaks that happen in that first say 7 to 21 days in the feedlot, if you can get that calf off to a good start, so many good things come from that, right? We know that if he's sick early on, he's going to take longer to finish. He's going to have lower marbling scores. There's all kinds of evidence. And once one's sick, then the next one's sick. That's why we really like some of our things that we have done, like again with the antioxidants, is because those are things that seem to interfere with the oxidative stress, inflammation, kind of this vicious cycle that occurs. So if we can kind of stop that by coming in with some strategic supplementation at the right time period early on, can we give him a more robust immune response? Not too robust, right? He's still got a direct nutrition to growth, but the right level of immune response that allows him to not break with BRD and kind of keeps him on track. So I think the wearables and the sensors are going to help with identifying sick animals more efficiently. And then I think as we can get more strategic with what nutrients actually need to be in this ration at this time, to really give them the optimal chance. And it's important to remember that the beast that's in the feedlot today is essentially an athlete, right? I mean, he's capable of gaining 3, 4, 5 pounds a day with the right nutrition. And a lot of our research that is in the NRC is back to research done in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. And while our animals might be getting to be as fat as they were back in some of the belt buckle cattle days of the 50s and the 60s, unfortunately, it's just not the same animal, right? I think we have different requirements.
No, hugely different, right? And this is where I think sometimes we need to get our heads around, in particular, some of the micronutrients that you've shared upon. Fascinating. So to summarize, maybe 3 or 4 key points that you would like to emphasize to producers, veterinarians, nutritionists in relation to receiving cattle, management, technology, nutrition that you'd really like to stick on with them.
I think the first one would be the more you can know about what you're buying, the better. And there truly is value in preconditioned cattle. And I think feedlot people know that. I think we're to the point now where the beef herd is so small that sometimes it's like, I'll take literally whatever's got 4 hooves and a tail because, there's just not as many of those calves available. But where they are available, they are valuable. And I think it's important for our cow calf folks to hear that message, right? That, certainly this is the year where creep feeding and putting more weight on your calves probably is the year to do it because of the prices. But is there additional value in preconditioning and what that value per hundredweight can bring because of that? So I think whatever you can know about that animal ahead of time is good. Thinking about strategic supplementation, so making sure that you've got some fortification of critical minerals like zinc, critical vitamins like vitamin A, some of the other things that maybe have been lesser researched. So like vitamin C and the B vitamins, the animals or the microbes make those, but we haven't done a lot of research on those. So they're kind of understudied. I think that'll be some of our area for the next 5 and 10 years to explore those more completely. And then the other one would be, and we're really just getting started on this, but are there ancillary or additional therapies that you can offer when an animal has to get pulled for a treatment, some sort of chute side nutritional treatment, or some kind of like just helping that animal get an additional boost in their nutrition to hopefully decrease the likelihood of a secondary treat and help get that animal back up on feed?
No, great. Very practical, sound ideas, that things to consider, things that people are doing now, but for the future, getting a bit more, as you stated earlier, precision in what we're doing in their nutrition. So, Dr. Hansen, I want to really thank you for being with us today. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, Chris. It was my pleasure.
And I also want to thank our audience for being with us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Rumination Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other platforms. And feel free to visit the Jeffo website at jeffo.ca for more information about what Jeffo does and our products in relation to feedlot cattle. This podcast was brought to you by Jeffo Nutrition, precision nutrition for a growing world. Have a great day.